Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Joanna Davidson, and I'm one of the associate directors at Kilichand Honors College, and also an associate professor in the Department of Anthropology and affiliate faculty in African Studies. We're really delighted that you're joining us for our open house today, which is going to focus on the experiential learning opportunities and the Keystone Project at Kilachand Honors College. And these are really distinctive aspects of the overall experience, this overall student experience at Kilachand. So today you're going to hear from some of our faculty, staff, and current students about their involvement and their perspectives on these facets of life at Kilachand. I do just want to let you know that there have been previous open house sessions on the overall curriculum and on our advising and student support services and on our living learning community. And you can view recordings of all of these sessions by visiting our website and going to the Welcome Class of 2025 page. So before we get started on our presentations, I want all of our panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll get started with that.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Danny Hoffman. I'm one of the academic advisors at Kilicon Honors College. Really excited to have you here on this Saturday. My role as an advisor is to help you integrate your experience at BU with Kilichand, and I also have the unique opportunity to support our students in a number of these different experiential learning opportunities, whether that's identifying which ones make sense for your pathway or helping you figure out where you want to go in the world, whether that's for study abroad, which is an external program, or participating in one of the unique programs that we offer specifically at Kilichand.
Trent, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Joanna. So I am Trent Masiki. I'm a postdoctoral scholar in the Kilichon Honors College, a third-year postdoctoral scholar. And I teach the first-year writing studio and also the senior Keystone Project seminars, 501 and 502. And I'm also an affiliate faculty member in the Center for Anti-Racist Research and participated in the IFD experience, which I'll be talking about later in Kampala, Uganda.
Hello, my name is Steve. I'm a third-year student on the BA/MA track for mathematics, and then I'll be speaking about the Boston Area Health Education Center experience later today.
Hi everyone, my name is Dragon. I'm currently a senior at Boston University with a major in psychology. I was also with Dr. Masiki in Uganda, so I'll be talking about that later too.
Hey everyone, I'm Susrita. I am a junior at BU studying biology and computer science, and I'll be speaking about my experience with IFD, which was different than Professor Masiki and Dragon's, but also how that led into my Keystone Project, or will be.
And hi, I'm Julia Maruka. I'm a senior student at Kilichon, and I'm in comms because I'm majoring in journalism and minoring in earth and environmental science and French. And I'm going to be talking about my process on my Keystone project and kind of what that journey has looked like from the beginning of my time at Kilichon up until now, when I'm about to be ready to present it in about a week. But yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. We have just a fabulous panel for you today. I'm going to hand things over to Danny to guide us through some of the experiential learning opportunities at Kilichand in just a sec. But first, I encourage you, as you see in the chat, I encourage you to write any questions that you have in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We have our head of student services, Amanda Shallian, answering many of these questions, as many as she can behind the scenes, but we're also going to have time at the end of our panel presentations to take some of these questions live as well. So please go ahead and jot down your questions as they occur to you throughout the presentations. Thanks. Over to you, Denny.
Fabulous. So as you all know, we are a four-year program at BU, and we give you a unique opportunity to explore and build your creative and critical thinking skills throughout our curriculum, right? And our experiential learning program offers you the space to take your learning outside of the traditional academic classroom through collaborations both with the city of Boston and across the globe. And your student experience will culminate in the Keystone Project, which we'll get into in a little bit. I'm really excited. This is some of my favorite things. So in your first and second year, you'll have different opportunities to select a first year seminar and then to take a course on global challenges. And in those classes specifically, there are unique opportunities to really get your hands dirty, so to speak, or you got to stay clean when you're exploring a clean lab. You see here some students who are also on tour over at Walden Pond, which is just outside the city of Boston. And these are unique opportunities within the classroom that kind of start your journey at Kilichon and start getting you to think about, how can I take what I'm learning, what I'm reading about, what I'm talking about in the classroom into the world and into things that I'm really passionate about. And another element to those are our co-curricular experiences. And this is where we bring unique folks to campus and engage with our classroom experiences. We take you out of the classroom. We go to the Museum of Fine Arts, the ICA, as a part of your first year writing course. And you kind of engage with those spaces and get to meet the curators of those events and talk to them about how they came up with these ideas, why they chose to make some of those decisions. And so that's kind of intricately tied into different elements of the Kilichon curriculum. And one of those pieces that's tied to our curriculum that is a unique opportunity to go outside is our partnership with the Boston Area Health Education Center. And I'm really excited that we have one of the students who has participated in this with me last year. It's a partnership when you're taking part of the Global Challenges sequence, the 302, which is focused on forced displacement, and they get to go lead a global health class with Boston public school students. So I'm going to stop the share real quick so Steve can talk a little bit about his experience and what that was like.
Yeah, so I'm going to be referring to this program, Boston Area Health Education Center, as BAHEC, just to introduce you to the acronyms that we'll be hearing a lot. So what we do is we meet twice a week. During the first meeting, we prepare the lesson that we're going to teach to the high school students or middle school students on the week after. And then on the other day, which is typically Wednesday, we present those lessons at a classroom in the medical campus. During normal times, of course, we'll be meeting with those students in person. You really get to create a lot of active classroom activities that enable the students to engage with the material that we prepare in a very active way. But then, of course, this year everything is remote, so it looks a little bit different actually. And then last spring, before COVID happened, we were able to teach 6 lessons to these students before COVID started. And then after COVID, we recorded 3 lessons for these students actually, which I hope they watched. For me personally, the really nice thing about BAHEC is that my major has nothing to do with public health, but BAHEC gives me an opportunity to kind of explore what I can do with things outside of my discipline, even though I don't really learn about these in my own classroom experience. And that's one of the things that I really appreciated about BAHEC, is to realize that there is a lot of opportunities out there, even if what you study in the classroom may not seem to be directly related to that. And it also showcase to the students in the program, the students that attend BAHEC, that they don't have to study public health or other closely related discipline to pursue a career in this area. There's one of the lessons that we actually recorded for them last year was to explain that how subjects like engineering, math, etc. can also be applied to areas in public health. And I really hope they took away some important lessons from that. And then feel free to ask me if you have any questions about BAHEC during the Q&A session at the end. I hope that's important stuff.
Definitely, Steve. Thank you so much. I know it's a really powerful experience for a lot of our students. It's an opportunity to kind of build relationships within the Boston community, as well as to work closely with your Kilichon peers to develop unique lesson plans. So that is one element, and that often takes place in your second or third year, depending on how you elect to continue your Kilichon experience. Another component that we partner with is the Initiative on Forced Displacement. And this initiative really kind of was launched out of, in many ways, the Forced Displacement, the Global Health course. And it kind of has taken off in a lot of ways in our partnership with Professor Zaman and Director Preston, giving us an opportunity to engage and think about this topic throughout the year. So during the academic year, you may be taking a class on this. The Forced Displacement Program also offers what we call hub co-curricular experiences, which are non-academic, non-graded experiences that you can do to engage in the material, to work with your peers and dive into these challenging topics. It also offers really unique opportunities to go up and take a course with other students from all over the world and think about how might I bring my skills and talents to this particular challenge in Uganda or in Lebanon or in Colombia. And one element of that, of course, is pre-departure meetings. We take some time to think about and come together as a group to talk and think about how we can do that. And then in both in a January term or over the course of the summer, there are programs that you can apply for as students. And we have a couple folks here who are going to talk about their experiences, both in helping prepare the material and thinking about what we do before we get to our partner university. And then what does it look like when we are there on campus? So we're going to pass it over to Professor Masiki, who's going to talk a little bit about his role, both in preparing material and then what it was like for him as a faculty member in Uganda.
Thank you, Danny. And before I talk about my particular experience, I want to talk a little bit about share with you a little bit about the mission and the vision of IFD. So the initiative on forced displacement provides a platform for research, pedagogy, and global engagement in an innovative and interdisciplinary manner. The initiative fosters multidisciplinary collaborations amongst faculty, students, and staff from across the multiple universities, engaging them in challenges of forced displacement, one of the major moral imperatives of our time. Through a tripartite mission focused on teaching, research, and service, IFD seeks to train the next generation of global leaders, support rigorous research, and develop strong local and international partnerships that will establish Boston University as a leader in interdisciplinary engagement with the crisis of forced displacement. So Danny and I were co-administrators for the initial IFD study abroad experience in Uganda, which took place in the summer of 2019. We took an interdisciplinary team of students there to develop solutions to optimize the triage experience in the Adjumani refugee camp in northern Uganda. And the refugees in that camp are from the Southern Sudan conflict, which is on the northern border of Uganda. The BU students worked with fellow students in the School of Public Health at Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, which is the capital of Uganda. And they worked there to develop their solutions in collaborative teams. And I developed and led pre-departure and on-site workshops about the history, culture, and politics of Uganda, and also on the ethics of US institutions conducting humanitarian engineering initiatives in Africa. So we talked about topics like the white savior complex. And Dragon, as Danny said, was one of the students who who participated in that initial Uganda experience, which we hope in a post-pandemic world to continue each summer. So I'll let Dragon talk to you about his experience as a student.
Thanks, Dr. Masiki. I guess it's been 2 years, so let's see if I can remember everything clearly. Kilichon puts a lot of emphasis on multidisciplinary activities and making sure that what you're learning in the classroom is able to be incorporated into real life. And I think going to a different continent completely with a completely new set of students really opens your eyes to what you can and what you cannot do. I think Dr. Masiki did a really good job explaining what we learned and what we did. So I'm going to talk about some of my favorite experiences instead. And so as a psych major, I like studying human relations and how people think. And so the one Makerere student in our group, his name was Fred. We talked a lot about how he was trying to figure out how to run his farm and how to incorporate his studies into his real life and make sure that what he was doing is what he wanted to do, which is kind of a novel idea because when I think of other people, I don't really necessarily think the same way. And so my favorite experience with him was the last day of our trip. After our presentation, I took him to a Chinese restaurant because he had never experienced Chinese cuisine before, and kind of teaching him how to use chopsticks and learning about what he thought about the food and our culture and his culture. That kind of mesh was super interesting and opened my eyes to just the entire, I guess, world and what I could do in it. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you, Dragon. And there are a lot of ways in which this builds into your academic journey, right? So Dragon did this as a part of his, after his sophomore year, and it was a unique moment in his life and his journey. And there are many places that you can fit it in, right? So we've talked a little bit about the summer program. We also run a January program in Lebanon. And the last time we were able to run that was in January of 2020. We had students who went to Beirut to work with students at the American University of Beirut. And for one of our students, that ended up really being a springboard for the rest of her journey and experience. So I'm going to pass it back to Susita to talk about her experience, both in Lebanon and how that has impacted her journey since then.
So I actually never went to Lebanon. Actually, what happened was that summer I was able to join the Summer Institute for Forced Displacement because COVID happened, but it was all virtual. And it was very much a different experience, but also one I really appreciated because it's kind of the flipped version of what happened. So I took the course, and my experience from the course on forced displacement, we basically developed what we thought was going to be a really feasible idea for a final project, a tool or an intervention that could be used in a Palestinian refugee camp or anything like that. And from there, we were like, okay, we have time over the summer, like, let's do something with this. So a subset of our big group came together and we're like, okay, we're available, let's see what we can do. And we had the pleasure of like working with other mentors to develop this project into something more. And at the end of our time during the summer, we had turned our like Google Slides like slideshow into a 30-page workbook where we collaborated with the Palestinian Red Crescent Society, which is like the Red Cross. And we developed a whole workbook for children. And we also got to write a paper about some of the background literature and some of the previous interventions and how our intervention fit into the mix. And so it was a really interesting opportunity. And like, yes, COVID happened, but in a way, it was a really great experience despite everything else that was happening around us.
Fabulous, thank you. And I think this goes to show there's so many ways in which we work, and that the students kind of take on the different elements of things that are important to them and incorporate it into the world. And we never know where some of these things will lead us. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about a unique program that we had just launched, and Joanna is going to tell us a little bit more.
Okay, thanks, Danny. So this is, as Danny said, a brand new initiative at Kilichand, the Kilichon Internship Program. We're calling it Kipp for now. And what we found over the years is that many Kilichon students want to intern over the summer at various nonprofit organizations, but often these positions don't come with salaries. So these really valuable and impactful experiences are prohibitive for students who can't afford, who aren't in a position to take a kind of a volunteer summer experience. So the Kipp Initiative is designed to provide stipends for students in such positions. So Kilichon, we will fund selected students who have secured an internship position at a social service or a social justice nonprofit organization over the summer. And actually, we have just selected our first Kipp funded students for this summer. And we're really excited to learn from their experiences in doing this and then continue to grow the program in future years. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, we're now gonna shift gears a little bit and talk about the Keystone Project. Now, just as a general introduction, the Keystone Project is the kind of culminating experience through the 4 years of a Kilichon student's trajectory. And it's really an opportunity to develop a research project or a creative endeavor or even an invention, often interdisciplinary in nature, because that's how we roll at Kilichon. And it's the idea is to devote ample time, usually in your senior year, but many students begin quite a bit earlier, to dig deeper into a more substantial scholarly project based on a topic that really emerges from your own intellectual curiosity and passion. And these projects can take many forms. So if we go to the next slide, we can see that, for example, just to give a few examples, in recent years, we've had a Keystone project that focused on ant brain structure. So many Keystone projects can happen in conjunction with existing faculty research in labs, and students often work on a piece of what a faculty member is doing or develop their own projects alongside faculty members. On the humanities side, we had a recent project that looked at food and fictionalization in Juvenile's 11th satire. And some of the Keystone projects can really look a little bit like what would be kind of like an honors thesis or a work for distinction in a typical discipline, but Kilichon students bring their interdisciplinary training to bear on whatever project they design. We had a student invent and design a smart EpiPen, which was an amazing project, and really sort of continue to look to ways to bring that to market. And then we have creative projects. This is an example of Black Mirror's show pitch. I also want to show you on the next slide a project actually from one of our current seniors, Issa Very. And Issa wrote, composed, and directed her own musical called Already Home. And then she also developed a companion annotated libretto to go along with it. Now, when Issa first conceived of this project, it was meant to be a live performance, a live kind of production performance of the musical. But because of the COVID pandemic, those plans couldn't be carried out. And that, of course, did not stop Issa. She and her team took the opportunity really to reimagine the production for a virtual platform. And instead of kind of simply providing a recording of the performance for kind of a virtual viewing event, they really kind of leaned in to the opportunity to rethink what an immersive theater experience could look like, could be in this new virtual world that we're all living in. So the results of their efforts can be seen by all of you on the Already Home website, which is on this slide. And she just did, Issa had a launching party for the website and the performance just last week, and it was really phenomenal, just totally inspirational. So I encourage you all to visit this website and get a kind of more close-up view of what's possible as a Keystone project. So now I'm going to turn it back to Danny to talk about some of the various Keystone pathways.
Yes, and so as a part of your journey, you get to choose a lot of different ways in which that you can explore what's important to you and how you want to dive into that. And there, just like you have choices in your kind of step-by-step process, what classes you're taking, what activities you're engaging in, you have a couple of different options for how you fulfill your senior research through your Keystone project, the Keystone pathway. And then there's a Kilichon pathway, which is the Keystone Project, essentially. And then there are a number of other application-based honors programs within the different departments. So for example, there's the College of Arts and Science honors in the major pathway, Sargent College thesis for distinction, and many, many more. The point being, there's a lot, you have a lot of options. We're here to support you on that journey and think about what makes sense for you as you kind of seek to combine your interests in your senior year, whether that's doing a kind of a deep dive in your major or kind of branching out and expanding into some different disciplines that maybe you haven't had an opportunity to do yet.
Great, thanks, Danny. And just to build on that, we actually do support students to think about Keystone projects that are outside of their major disciplinary area and even of their college, their school or college. So the example that I just gave of Issa's project, Issa is a student in the School of Hospitality Administration, and then she wrote a musical. So those are the kinds of things that we really like to see students kind of think, not only outside the box in terms of what's possible, but also kind of ways in which they can develop their Keystone project, either in conjunction, again, as a kind of a continued deep dive into what they're majoring in, or as an opportunity to explore something outside their major. Now, if all this sounds a little bit daunting from where you stand right now, I just want to reassure you that there is a lot of support built into the Kilichon curriculum as you develop your Keystone project. So most of this happens in the junior and senior years. And there's a course actually typically taken in your junior year that is devoted to, it's really a workshop kind of course that's devoted to helping you think through, develop, design, and ultimately propose your Keystone project. And then in your senior year, you typically enroll, depending on which pathway you're in, you typically enroll in independent study courses with your Keystone advisor. So it's dedicated course time to work on your Keystone project. And then there's even various Keystone supports, as Professor Masiki mentioned, built into the 2 senior seminars, 501 and 502. There's opportunities within those classes to develop aspects of your Keystone project and even rehearse, in some cases, your presentation, which we'll talk about in a moment. So I'm going to hand it over to Susrita to kind of build on what you talked about before, Susrita, and how your kind of own trajectory of developing a Keystone project through your, through what you discussed as your experiential learning opportunity, how you see that kind of connected to your Keystone.
Yeah, so I will say when I'm taking the 451, the proposal course right now, and I will say when the semester started, I had no idea what I was going to do. It got to the point where I was so unsure. I had 2 ideas and I was like, I don't know which one I'm going to do. So like the first couple of assignments, I did like 2 versions of the assignment because I was like, I don't know which one I might do. But I ended up choosing to continue the project that I had talked about previously, the workbook that my team had developed. And so my Keystone that I'm hopefully going to do with my proposal is to basically send out a survey or questionnaire and get responses and opinions about how the workbook felt. Like, was it usable? Was it effective? And it's a parent-child workbook. So my hope is that I get an idea of how the parents perceived it, how the children perceived it. Was it actually helpful at all? And so getting that kind of information, I think, will also kind of bring some closure to the project in general. And I'm really, really excited about it. And I think the support that you get along the way, you get a tremendous amount of support. So for example, like I was saying, like I had no idea what I was going to do. And after conversations with my 451 professor and really just fleshing it out with other mentors, that's how I came to my decision. And I just finished my first draft of my proposal last weekend. So it's exciting stuff. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of support and it feels overwhelming, but as you break it down into bite-sized pieces, like where you can really focus on one step at a time, it becomes something that you can see happening in the future. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Susrita. We can't wait to see what you develop for the next steps in this. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Julia Maruka, who is currently a senior putting the finishing touches on her Keystone project. And I just have to say, just for a moment here, I have had the pleasure of knowing Julia since her very first year at Kilichon. Julia was a student in the first year seminar that I taught that year. And it's just been amazing to see how Julia has developed her project. Really, like I can see seeds of it from that very first year and how it has changed over the years. Julia was also a student in the course I taught 401 in her junior year, and now she's graduating and is about to present her Keystone project. So Julia, can you talk a little bit about your process of developing your Keystone and kind of where you're at and what you're thinking about it now?
So yeah, it's actually pretty funny. I was about to start off by explaining that. So when I took your class, when I took Professor Davidson's class, the Power, Politics, and Ethics of Storytelling, which is one of the freshman seminar classes that was available in my freshman year. One of the projects that we did in that class, which was all about looking at just about how human beings have told stories over time. And one of the big project that we did at the end of that class was that we made a podcast episode in groups about Boston and looking at Boston from some unique angle. And I was really inspired by that project that we did. And it took me a couple of years to figure out that this is kind of the direction I wanted to go with my project. So it definitely was not, as a freshman, I did that project and immediately knew what I wanted to do as a senior. Absolutely not. But it ended up inspiring what my project is now, which I'm going to be presenting next Saturday at the Keystone Symposium, which is a podcast called Disappearing Boston. And it is a climate change podcast about places in the Boston area region that are threatened by sea level rise and as a result might disappear in the future. And for this podcast, I interviewed residents and local experts and community members about what it feels like to be living in a coastal city and what things are happening right now that are putting these areas at risk and what's being done and what the plans are for the future to make these places safer or kind of figure out what's just going to happen in them and how they feel about that. And it's something that really combines my interest in journalism and especially in audio journalism. It's kind of my dream to work for NPR or some other type of audio journalism institution, and it combines my interest in environmental science and climate change, which I spend way too much time worrying about. And it also really kind of ties in this idea of looking at other people's lived experiences and exploring the world around you from a bunch of different angles. But like I said before, I did not have this idea instantly as a freshman. And I honestly vividly remember being a freshman or a sophomore and looking at some other students who had their idea earlier than me and thinking, whoa, I'm not ready. But it ended up being, because there are all these classes that you take through Kilichon in which you work with Kilichon professors to kind of hone your idea and come up with different angles on the topics and skill sets that you're interested in, I ended up being able to develop this idea over time. And it definitely was not something that just burst fully formed. So like I said, next Saturday, I'm going to be presenting my project at the Keystone Symposium. And getting to this point over the past semester has really been a process. It's been working with my faculty advisor, Professor Ann Donahue, who's in comm, and with those classes that I mentioned, but it's also just been a process of working with other Kilichon students and talking about, hey, what are we working on? What is it like? I mean, we have sessions in our class that we're taking for our last semester as seniors where we talk about what our progress is each week and like what we're getting done, what we're not getting done. So it's been, I think that's one of the best parts of the Keystone Project is getting to talk to other students who are in the Honors College with you and share your perspectives on what it's like to be wrapping up what you've done over the past 4 years.
Thank you, Julia. That was beautiful. And I cannot wait to see your presentation and hear the podcast. It's really just, it's an amazing project. And you spoke to so many different dimensions of it. I really like that you highlighted that kind of peer collaborative dimension of it, which often, we lose sight of that when we think about independent research. These are independently designed projects. They come out of your own interests, but they are collaboratively informed by peers, in peer groups and with faculty members. And it's part of what it means to be in this community, this intellectual community with each other. So thanks for highlighting that. Julia mentioned the Keystone Symposium, and this is something that we do every spring at the end of spring semester, in which every single graduating senior presents their Keystone project, either in the form of a public talk or in a poster. So usually back in the before time, this is a huge in-person event. It was like a big, wonderful kind of conference in which students were presenting their work. It was open to the public. But the last year and this year, of course, we have pivoted to a Zoom format. And we were at first a little bit concerned that we wouldn't be able to kind of pull off the same kind of vibrancy in a Zoom format. But what we saw last year was that we were actually able to keep much of the integrity of the symposium intact. It was live. It was open to the public, and in some ways even more open to the public because it was virtual. It was on Zoom. Many family members and other people who weren't physically in Boston could attend the event, and we're going to invite you to attend it in a moment. And then it's also really interactive. It's just this amazing showcase of the diversity of ideas and research inquiries and just the stellar quality of these culminating kind of intellectual and creative projects. So next weekend is actually our Keystone Symposium, and you're all invited to come. Everyone, feel free to join us. There's 2 sessions on Saturday and 1 session on Sunday. You can see Julia present along with many other seniors present their projects. And if you need more information, just check our website or follow us on Instagram and you can find out more information about that. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our panel presentation. If you have any questions or want to just reach out to students to get more perspectives, please do contact any of our ambassadors. And you can find more information about them, including their contact information on our website if you go to the People tab and under Ambassadors. They're just a wonderful group of students who can tell you more about anything that we discussed or anything else that you want to know about the student experience at Kilichon. Our next and final open house is this coming Thursday, April 22nd. It's actually one of the favorite sessions because it's an all-student panel. So please do sign up for that one. And again, I just want to remind you that recordings of any of the previous sessions are on our website. Okay, I think we've come to the end of all of our slides here. So we're just going to show up on the screen again and take your questions. I'm just going to check the Q&A box here and make sure that we've got some questions coming in. There aren't any open questions. So now would be a good time if any of you in the audience out there want to ask anyone here on the panel to elaborate more on some of the things that you heard or any other questions that you might have.
I actually have a question that I often ask is if really this is for any of you, what was the process you went through when you were deciding to engage in one of these projects, whether it was BAHEC or, going to be a partner of the IFD, or even for the folks, doing your research, like, what was your thought process and why did you end up deciding to do whatever it is you ended up doing? Sutrita?
I think for me, it definitely stemmed out of the 302 course, the course on forced displacement. And really it was not more of like I really had an intent and a purpose, more of I want to see where this project could go, because we thought it was feasible and we were like, hey, could this develop into something more? Let's see what the possibilities are. And I think the idea of having so many possibilities was what really drew me to the summer program itself.
So I think for me, I knew that I wanted to do something about climate change, especially after, I talk about this in my actual presentation that I'm going to give on Saturday, but there was a moment in my sophomore year when the IPCC report had just come out, and I went to the Esplanade, which is right by the Charles River outside of BU, and I just kind of sat there and thought, wow. So that was something that was really important to me, and I also wanted to kind of get practice doing the type of media that I wanted to do in the future. And I felt it just kind of really naturally came together as something that I could combine all my interests in. And for me, those did end up being my major and minor, but those don't necessarily have to be the case for if you're interested in something that isn't actually something that you're going to get on your diploma as your area of study. That's totally fine too. And I have plenty of friends and peers in Kilichon whose projects don't match up with what they are officially studying on paper. So, but for me, it was really about combining my kind of two passions of journalism and of environmental science.
Thanks, Julia. We do have a question that came in that I'm going to just throw right back at you, and then others add in because you're the closest to graduating. And the question is, do many seniors continue to work on their Keystone projects after they graduate? So if any of you, Julia, I'll let you start, of others that your friends who've graduated, and think through that question. And then maybe I'll just tack on a little bit to that question. What do you think you're going to do that might be related or not related to your project after you graduated? After you're really graduating, I can't believe it.
I can't believe it either, honestly. So I can't really speak for any other students. I know of a few other people. I know of one other student who is also doing a journalism related project, and I believe that they said that they are going to continue working on it after they graduate. But for me, I'm hoping to potentially do kind of a season 2 of my podcast. It ended up being something that it had only 3 episodes, and I had been hoping before COVID to make it much longer and more in depth. I'd been hoping to work over the summer on it. But I'm hoping to potentially continue it in the future wherever I end up going after graduation, and exploring what it looks like to look at climate change, maybe back in my hometown, because I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which isn't a coastal city, but has its own unique kind of concerns about climate change. And so I hope to potentially look at that from a different angle in the future. And I know some people who are totally not going to do anything with their Keystone after they graduate, but who feel like their experience of working on it has brought them some really cool skills and experiences that they can bring with them into whatever their path is after they graduate. And that can be the case too with some people who are doing Keystone projects that are totally not within their major. And I mean, it might not be relevant if they're like going to med school, but they did some type of really creative project that may not be relevant to their how I'm going to get a job, but it's also something that they can take with them and potentially work on after graduation.
Thanks, Julia. I can totally imagine subsequent episodes, right, of your podcast, and it's a great justification to just travel the world and do wherever you go, right? This is a relevant question in different ways, so just keep doing it in any way that you can. I think it's great. Anyone else on the screen want to talk about either students that you know, alums who have kind of continued in some ways what they were working on at Kilichon, or your own thoughts about doing that? Dragon, go.
I'm also a senior, so it's also kind of scary that I'll be presenting my project next weekend. My Keystone involves doing mental health research on video games. So I wanted to see if video games had an inherent detriment or positivity towards someone's mental health. So what I did was I did a 5-episode also kind of podcast. It was more interview style at the end, just to get really in depth about someone's holistic understanding of what video games meant to them. And then I sent out a Google form to BU students, other students at other universities, and a lot of the gaming communities I'm in, to see if there was a correlation between their BDI scores, their Beck Depression Inventory score, and their gaming habits. I don't know if I'll necessarily carry on this project into the future, but I know as someone who's going to grad school for mental health counseling, and how many people are kind of like turning to gaming within the pandemic, to kind of be able to learn from this experience and take it to professional practice. And so if someone comes to me with, you know, their gaming habits, where they think they're addicted to gaming, really helping them talk through what they're going through and helping them understand that gaming might actually be a way they're coping with other problems and kind of figuring it out from there.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on this? I'll throw in an example from one of the earliest years, one of the earliest Keystone projects, from the very first graduating class at Kilachand. There was a student, Vidya, who did a Keystone project on maternal health in Liberia. She was really interested in some aspects of global health. And she did a really wonderful Keystone project and presentation, just really based on mostly kind of a literature review and a kind of understanding of some public health and development literature. And she wanted to learn so much more that she ended up getting a job with an organization that was working on maternal and child health in Liberia. And it happened to coincide right with when the Ebola epidemic surged in that region. And most expat international workers in Liberia left, and Vidya decided to stay, and she got really involved in immediate community health and responses during the Ebola epidemic, which ultimately led her to decide to go into global public health and medicine. So she just finished medical school and she's just continuing on this track. So one idea from a Keystone really led into certainly things that she couldn't have anticipated, but she brought her learning from the Keystone work into everything that she did and her kind of decision making after. So it was a really powerful example. We have another question. The question is, what's something you wish you knew before you engaged in the Keystone Project? What a great question. And what would you have changed? And I suppose, you know, we can take COVID out of that because none of us would have known that. All of the Keystone projects changed in some ways. And there's been an amazing effort to pivot in many projects that could have been derailed, but were then, you know, really in some ways rethought through COVID. So other than COVID, what is something that you wish you had known, and what would you have changed? Does anyone want to take that on? I'm going to pass it to Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, so my answer will be kind of tangentially related to this, but one piece of advice that's really helpful for incoming students is that you really want to start thinking about Keystone in your first year, especially trying to build those connections with faculty members that teach your classes, because faculty members are way more likely to agree to mentor you for a year-long project like this if they know you on a more personal level versus if you just start cold emailing people in your second semester of your junior year and then hoping that one of them will agree to mentor you. So really try to make an effort to go to office hours, talk to your professor, showcase your interest in the area that you're studying or that they are learning, and then build those connections and try to maintain them throughout the year. So then by the time when you need a faculty member to supervise your Keystone project, you can ask if they have any idea, or you can bounce your idea with your advisor, and then it'll become a much more smooth process than if you try to start this process late in the spring semester of your junior year, I think.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Susita and then Julia.
I just want to tag on to what Steve said. And if you don't know what you're going to do for your Keystone, or if your Keystone project is in a field outside of your major, so like I'm a biology and computer science major, and like psychology and children's mental health is nowhere near any of those. And so I think it's also important just to network in general, because the people who I've met through Kilichon are the ones who have directed me to people in the psych department who can really help me and guide my project. So I definitely think that even if you're unsure, networking is never a bad thing, and definitely go out of your way to try to talk to people, because you don't know, you might not know where your Keystone project will end up. And so it's going to be helpful either way.
And I think that my contribution to this conversation would just be to think like, it does take time to do the project, like is kind of an exercise in time management in some ways, but don't take that in a like, oh my God, that sounds terrifying way, because that's how I took it as a freshman. I vividly remember being an incoming Kilichon student and thinking, oh my God, how am I ever going to get to being a senior with a fully fledged Keystone project? So it's like, it is a balance here. I feel like I'm giving conflicting advice, but once you get to the point when you're actually working on it, I think I would have liked to have made a better schedule for myself on how I'm going to work on it. For me, I happened to take mine through a class I took with my faculty advisor. She teaches a podcasting class, and that was how she recommended making a schedule for myself, is doing the first part of the project as part of an official class. So that helped me. But once I got into this semester, I was thinking, I'm overloading classes. I have a lot of other stuff to do. So making the time to work on it was a challenge. So I think one thing I would recommend is, once you get to that point, is kind of figuring out, okay, what's it going to take for me to get this process done? But at the same time, I also, like, the big piece of advice that I wish I had known coming in is, like, don't think you have to have your idea already. Don't think you have to have it when you see somebody who happens to be ahead of you have it by like sophomore year. That's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be you. It may not be you. And I mean, I know plenty of people who changed their Keystone idea in their junior year. And people who, because of COVID, had to change it the summer before their senior year. I know people who've changed their advisor. I mean, these aren't always ideal situations, but there's a lot of kind of elasticity, I guess, in what you can change and what you can kind of pivot when it comes to your idea. And because people have great ideas about new projects they could do all the time. And there's always ways to incorporate the new direction that you might be interested in going into. And Kilichon is really, that's the other thing, it's just like Kilichon really wants you to succeed with the Keystone Project, and there are always going to be resources to help you make what you want to make into a reality.
Go ahead, Dragon. I was going to call on you anyway, Dragon, so I'm glad you raised your hand.
Thanks. So as a psych major, I realized there's a lot of personal development that goes on through your 4 years of college. And so I think my advice would be keep an open mind, especially because like a lot of people transfer majors, you meet new people, as other people have said, like as you go through different Kilichon classes and you learn different things, like there's a lot of ideas that can come to your head. And so I wouldn't say don't think about it your freshman year, but definitely, try to figure out what you like and what you're passionate about, and then kind of develop that through your courses in Kilichon and your regular courses. And then by your junior year, Kilichon will support you in kind of developing that into a full-fledged idea. So just figure out what's going on as you're going on, and there's no stress about it. Everything will work out in the end.
You're an example of everything working out in the end, right? All right, thank you. Those are great answers. I think the only thing I would add, just seeing many students go through this process and working with students as a Keystone advisor, is kind of build on some of what everybody's saying in terms of, Dragon, you put it really well, as keeping an open mind. And part of that is that the Keystone is really an opportunity for you to ask a question that you're really interested in, genuinely interested in, and develop that in a way that keeps you open, as Dragon said, an open mind to possibilities, but really open to the kinds of things that you don't know. So often, I think most of scholarly training through high school and even parts of college is to kind of report back what you do know. You read something and you say what it's about, right? Or you learn something and you take a test on it and you show what you know. And the Keystone Project is really an opportunity to ask a question about something that you're really intensely curious about and you actually don't know the answer, right? And you might not know all of the answer by the end of it, but you've come a little closer by spending some time thinking about it and researching it and doing all the kinds of work that's involved in a Keystone Project. So for me, the intellectual exercise, and the one that I see is often the hardest one for students, especially really, really great, motivated, very, very successful students who are so used to showing their mastery over something, is to feel okay saying, I don't know this, right? And I'm still going to ask about it. And that's, I think, a good thing to keep in mind as you dream up all the possibilities of a Keystone Project. Okay, I think we have one more question. It might be the last one given our time. And the question is, if you choose a pathway through your college, so COM, CS, et cetera, will the project essentially be funneled through the honors class? Okay, so I'm going to give that one first to Danny in terms of talking that from an advisor perspective, and then any students who want to talk about that in terms of your own decisions of the pathway that you took.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And generally, most students who follow pathways through their home school will enroll in a course at their home school. So for example, if you're doing an honors thesis in CAS, there's a specific course that you enroll in senior year for that. You would also enroll in 501 and 502, which kind of supports you in your journey as you're thinking about, yourself, your growth, and getting ready for the presentation. But there's a specific course related to CAS, similarly for COM, Sergeant, et cetera. Any other?
Do any students want to talk about your own kind of experiences so far in your decisions about which pathway to take?
For me, I know that one of the options is the comm production path. For me, I'm not a film and TV major, so that wasn't really the direction I planned to go in. For me, it was just kind of a case of like what my major was and what kind of pathways existed to me. And this fit really well for me into the Kilichon version of the pathway. I mean, it was also it was a project that was really born in the kind of structure of Kilichand, like with Kilichon professors. But Professor Donahue isn't somebody who teaches a Kilichon class. She's in COM, and I met her through COM. So, I mean, I think that is one thing where we talk so much about interdisciplinarity as part of Kilichand, and it is something that can bring, even if you aren't doing an outside pathway, you can really kind of bring different parts of your college experience together through your Keystone. I do know other people who are doing like engineering path Keystone projects, and the experience does end up being a little bit different for them in terms of like what paperwork they have to do basically, but they're still in the classes with Kilichon to talk to their peers about like what the process of working on their project is like. And it may look a little different than somebody who is doing one through the traditional Kilichon pathway, but they still get that experience of getting to work together with one another.
Thanks, Julia. Steve, do you want to weigh in here?
So my major is in pure math, and I want to go on to PhD programs in that area. So it makes more sense for me to be doing a senior thesis here from my own department that's like very like focused on a particular area in math as opposed to being an interdisciplinary project. And the flexibility of fulfilling this Keystone project requirement allows me to do something like that. But with respect to the Kilichon aspect, it really gives me an opportunity to try to figure out how to communicate my research, which is kind of on a more abstract level, to a general audience, and then learn how to articulate that kind of stuff to people that are not really familiar with the jargons in my discipline. And that's something that I really enjoy learning thus far.
That's such a great point, Stephen. It's actually a requirement as part of the final Kilichon process. You can be very, very deep into the intricate jargon in your own discipline. And then, as Steve says, we ask you to, actually translate that for someone who doesn't know anything about your discipline. So the final kind of document that you hand in, and the Keystone Symposium, the presentation that you make, as Steve says, is really often one of the most interesting Kilichon specific challenges, right? You need to show how what you've done, right, that might be so deeply ingrained within the particularities of your discipline, of your specialization. You need to get someone else who knows nothing about that excited about it, and at the very least understand it. So it's one of the things we really value, is that effort to translate and speak to each other across different disciplinary specialties. Okay, we are at the end of our time here, so I want to thank you all for attending on this Saturday, giving us some really great questions to think about. We hope that you will attend the symposium. As already you've seen some really little snippets, little trailers of great projects. So please do come to the symposium next week. Feel free to reach out again to the ambassadors or any of us. Good luck with your decision-making process, and we hope to see you at Kilichon in the fall. And thank you to all of our panelists for your wonderful contributions.